right, hello everyone. My name is Megan Robert. I am owner of After the Stork. I am a child sleep coach, a postpartum doula, and a former nanny. So my main focus is to help families get the sleep that they need in order to survive and thrive. So I work with families in two different ways. One, families that want to be proactive. Expecting parents who want to understand sleep development so that they can shape sleep over time. Parents who know that they're about to go through a certain transition, that 4-month area where a schedule starts to be beneficial, the 3 to 2 naps, 2 to 1 nap, 1 to no nap, and that crib to bed transition. So if you're someone who's wanting to be proactive and you know you're coming up on a transition, I can help you out. I also help, and this is my main clientele, is families who are struggling. So I help families who are struggling by educating on sleep development, what the different components are needed in order to create sleep habits. We talk about the main thing, which is usually the child's inability to fall asleep on their own. We talk about the different methods that are available. So how involved you're going to be as a parent when you're helping your child to get the rest that they need. I then create a sleep plan that you use to implement, and while you're implementing the sleep plan, I support. So my main thing is to educate, to guide, and hold you accountable while also being motivating to keep you going. Help you understand when you need to be consistent and when you need to be flexible. So if you want more of a step-by-step process of what that looks like, you can go to afterthestorksleep.com/what is entailed, and I describe the whole process of working together. Now before we get started, I do need to go over a quick disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I help families from a behavioral perspective. So these videos, they are educational and informational purposes only. They are not meant to they are meant to promote the general understanding of child sleep for parents and anyone who works with young children. But the information contained within these videos and the resources that are available for download are not intended as and shall not be understood and construed as medical advice or substitute of medical advice. So for any medical issues or concerns that you have, I highly suggest talk to your pediatrician, talk to your healthcare provider. If your child snores or mouth breathes, please reach out to your pediatrician, an ENT, or a sleep specialist, as these are signs of underlying medical issues that could be preventing your child from getting some good, healthy sleep. That's not to say that everyone who snores and mouth breathes has an issue, but it is a good reason to get it at least checked out. And we're actually going to talk about that more later. So a quick recap of what we have been discussing. I have been going over the 5 elements of healthy sleep habits as proposed by Dr. Mark Weisbluth in his book, Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child. Over the past 2 weeks, I have touched on sleep duration and sleep regularity, and today we are talking about sleep consolidation. Over the next 2 weeks, I will be talking about sleep schedule, so that's next week, and then after that we'll be talking about naps. I'm saving naps for last because this is often where people struggle. If you want a brief description of those 5 elements, you can go to afterthestorksleep.com/elements of healthy sleep. Okay, so now let's dive into the topic for today, sleep consolidation. So we will be going over what does it mean, what is sleep consolidation, why is it important, what is normal, what are some red flags that might tell you that, okay, we need to do some assessing of my child's sleep, and what are the reasons that children experience the opposite of sleep consolidation, which is sleep fragmentation. And then we'll talk about how to possibly adjust by thinking outside of the box. Okay, so sleep consolidation. Sleep consolidation is uninterrupted sleep. Sleep that is continuous and not disrupted by awakenings. Now, when we talk about sleep consolidation, we also need to talk about sleep fragmentation. Sleep fragmentation is when there are wakings, full arousals, and it can often mean an abnormal shift in sleep rhythms, often to the lighter sleep stage. So, something to keep in mind is that a night of consolidated sleep, is not the same as a night of fragmented sleep. It's not equal. So we talked about sleep duration 2 weeks ago. If your child is getting 10 hours of consolidated sleep versus 10 hours of fragmented sleep, they are not equal. So this is why looking at all of the elements is important. We want to look at every single one because you might have a child who is getting the appropriate amount of sleep, who might be going to bed at a regular bedtime. However, their sleep is not good quality. If your child is waking frequently at night, and if your child possibly is someone who is snoring or mouth breathing, and they are a good sleeper, like you aren't experiencing having to go to them at night, but they still seem tired, there's a chance that they're not getting good quality sleep. So that's one of the reasons that we have to look at all the elements. They all contribute to one another, and even if you have one but you're missing another, it's going to be important to look into that. With sleep fragmentation, your child will experience similar effects as if they weren't getting enough sleep. So the decreased performance, behavioral issues, inability to regulate their emotions, experiencing negative emotions such as depression or sadness, inability to focus, all those same things that we've talked about in earlier live streams when we talked about an overtired child. If you're someone who would like a list of those, I did create a resource for you that lists all the red flags to look for, or a majority of the red flags to look for, in order to know if your child is overtired. So if you think your child possibly is not getting good quality sleep, or you just want to have this on hand, you can go to the link I mentioned above, afterthestorksleep.com/elements of healthy sleep. And when you receive the email with that document, you are also going to receive a bonus document that is a list of red flags for overtired children. So if you received my email this past Sunday from my, the weekly email list that I sent out, you already have this resource in that email. So if you haven't opened it, you can go back and get that. But it's good to have on hand so that you know if you need to take a step back and evaluate your child's situation. Okay, so now what is normal? It's normal sometimes for children to wake. You don't expect your child to just conk out, be asleep for an entire night or an entire nap. We do have natural arousals throughout the night. When I say arousals, I mean awakenings. That's something we refer to in the sleep world, is partial arousals or full arousals, which are also the same as partial awakenings and full awakenings. So our sleep, we're gonna dive into this a little bit more in the future when I start talking about the science of sleep, but I'm briefly going to touch on it so that you understand why consolidation is important. So when we are sleeping, our sleep cycles consist of different phases. We have deep sleep and we have light sleep. When we are in light sleep and then we're about to transition into the next sleep cycle, it is natural for us to wake. So we fall asleep, onset of sleep, deep sleep, and then we start to wake again. And then we start falling back to sleep. Okay, so it is natural that we wake throughout the night a couple times. Your child at these times might make some light noises, your child might cry out, your child might, just go right back to sleep. So this is normal. It is also normal for you. It's comparable to those times when you need to flip your pillow over to the cool side. You grab a drink of water. You reposition yourself in bed. Your child is going through something similar, where they're going to wake naturally throughout the night. But notice that those awakenings are because of the brain, not because of hunger. So again, those awakenings are because of the brain, not because of hunger. So it's important for you to recognize when are there wakings for true feedings and when are there wakings because your child is just naturally transitioning from one sleep cycle to the next. So try not to confuse those awakenings to hunger. Now that's not to say that a child is never going to feed at night. Let's make that very clear. With sleep training, we can absolutely keep feedings at night. The amount of feedings that your child's going to need will depend on your child's age, their caloric intake throughout the day. It's going to depend on them as an individual. What I generally see is that the first few weeks of a child's life, they're feeding all the time, sleep is not regular, they're not developed enough yet for that. Excuse me. However, around 6 weeks, you will see that first chunk of sleep at night start to lengthen. And then around 4 months, you will see generally feedings between 0 to 3 feedings, often 2, 0 to 2 feedings at night. Around 6 to 9 months, when I'm working with a family who's had a child who's waking up frequently at night, around 6 to 9 months, they will naturally drop those feedings if they know how to put themselves back to sleep between those sleep cycles. So if you're experiencing a child who wakes frequently at night, or if you're not sure if it's because of hunger or because of their sleep cycles, feel free to reach out. We can talk about that. Excuse me. Ooh, my mouth is dry. So, recap. If your child is waking, just be aware if it's really a time to feed or if it's a time that they're waking. Now, there are other times that your child might wake. And one of these is from what we call protective arousals. So this is the brain waking us up to prevent asphyxiation. Meaning, this is our brain waking us up to make sure that we breathe. This is something that is expected and very necessary for newborns. This helps to prevent SIDS. I don't know if this is a fact or not, but I believe that the reason that the Back to Sleep campaign is so important is because when a child is on their stomach, they are not able to breathe as well as they are when they're on their back. And sometimes newborns, when they're in that deep sleep, that protective arousal might not wake them in order to breathe again. So newborns, this is important for them to stay alive. However, this becomes an issue once they've passed that stage where SIDS is highly common. So once they're several months old, this is no longer something that should be needed. But if it is happening, if there are frequent awakenings at night and they're not because of the protective arousal, then we need to look and say, hey, do we need to work on helping our child get more consolidated sleep? Another reason that the protective arousal happens is because of snoring and mouth breathing. So if your child, we talked about this just at the beginning, but I'm going to dive into it more here. If your child is snoring or mouth breathing, and this is for anyone who snores or mouth breathes. This is not just for children. So if this is you or a spouse or a loved one, this is a sign that that person has large adenoids or tonsils. And when they have large adenoids or tonsils, that can obstruct the air passageway. So when they're sleeping, they oftentimes are not getting to go into that deep sleep. So you know how I mentioned that sleep fragmentation sometimes is abnormal shifting of sleep cycles. If someone is snoring or mouth breathing, they are most likely not getting consolidated sleep because what's happening is their brain is going to constantly wake them up to make sure that they breathe. Sometimes you don't remember this, but that is oftentimes what's going on, preventing someone from getting into that deep cycle and really getting a full cycle of sleep and sleeping well. So if this is your child, please go talk to your pediatrician, ENT, or sleep specialist. Just make sure it's not anything to be concerned about. For some people, it ends up not being a big deal. It's just this is what happens, but they seem to be breathing fine, they're sleeping fine. But for others, sometimes it's something to look into. I've been having conversation with someone who reached out to me beginning of December. And she reached out because her child is having a rough time sleeping at night. And as we were trying to set up the consultation, her daughter got a double ear infection. So we thought, okay, we're going to wait till that passes, and we will touch base, after that passes. So then we started talking again in January. Her daughter hit another rough patch where her throat was hurting, and she had, when the doctor looked at it, she had large tonsils, large adenoids, and they were red. So she ended up having strep. But after she no longer had strep, they noticed that it was still large. And so she talked to an ENT, and she's talked to her pediatrician, and they actually are doing a sleep study tomorrow. And we've been going back and forth, even though we're not working together yet. I've asked her to keep me updated to see what's going on. And she again has double ear infection, this poor girl. But these are all things that are possibly because of her large adenoids. So the sleep study is going to show whether or not those need to be removed to help her with the ear infections, the sore throat, and her sleep. But if this is your child, if your child is struggling, this is something that could be looked into, because it could be a bigger issue than, oh, she's just got large adenoids or tonsils. Okay, so those are some reasons that your child might have trouble sleeping that are kind of out of your control. However, here's one that's not, that you can help with. The inability to fall asleep on their own. If your child is not able to fall asleep on his or her own, then your child is going to wake more at night in between those sleep cycles that I mentioned. If they're not able to transition smoothly between sleep cycles, then this is something that we want to help them with so that they can have more consolidated sleep. If they are signaling out to you and you're having to go into the room every time to help them fall back asleep, big sign that they're having fragmented sleep. Okay, so aside from that, here are some common reasons that people might wake a baby voluntarily, and we're going to talk about ways to work around that. So oftentimes I'll get maybe a client who has older children, or a client who works, right? Or maybe someone whose child is just in daycare. So one time that I find that people want to wake their baby is when they have a newborn and they're trying to put their newborn on a schedule. Your newborn does not yet have a developed circadian rhythm. Your newborn is not going to be on a schedule. So let your baby sleep. This is important before I dive into all these. It's really important. This is the big message. Let your child sleep unless you are maintaining a schedule. So don't wake a sleeping child unless it's to help maintain a schedule. We're going to be talking about sleep schedules next week, because that's the fourth element of healthy sleep habits. But if you're not maintaining a schedule and you're just waking your child because of something else, that's going to prevent them from getting that consolidated sleep that's going to help them have good quality sleep that will help them throughout the day. So one reason that I see people waking a child is the newborn stage, thinking that they're going to help them get onto a schedule. This is a time to let your baby sleep, unless it's a time that you need to feed them. Your pediatrician maybe said you need to feed every 3 hours, every 4 hours. And then around 6 weeks, you can start helping by waking them at the same time every day and putting them to bed at the same time every day. However, with their naps, let them sleep. Another time that someone might wake a child is to dream feed. I don't generally suggest dream feedings. It's not to say that other people who do offer them are wrong, or that suggest them are wrong, but from my perspective, I believe that letting your child sleep when they need to sleep and feed when they need to feed is important. And generally, dream feedings are happening earlier in the night when your child gets the most deep sleep. So if we're interrupting that deep sleep to feed them, then we're preventing them from getting that good quality sleep that they get at the beginning of the night. Another time that parents are waking their children when we could possibly let them sleep longer is waking them early from naps because you might need to run an errand, or you have an appointment, or you have an older child to pick up from daycare. So let's think outside the box here, right? Can you reschedule that appointment so that it's at a time that your child's not sleeping? Do swim lessons really need to be at 2:30 instead of 3:30 when it gives you time for your child to wake up naturally, get dressed, and go to swim lessons? Can you hire a babysitter to come stay at the house for an hour while you go pick up your older child from daycare, or vice versa? Something else that I see is children who are in daycare and the parents have to go pick them up in the middle of a nap. Can you work around that? Can you pick them up from daycare prior to nap time and then have them sleep at home? Can you ask daycare if they can stay later and you pick them up at a later time? You know, sometimes it's something simple and sometimes it's not, but if it's something that you can work around to help your child get consolidated naps, it's going to be very helpful for them. You're probably going to see them sleep better at night if they're getting good naps during the day because, as we've mentioned before, sleep begets sleep. Sleeplessness begets sleeplessness. Now, the email that I sent out this past week to our Stork community was all about imperfection. So I just want you to know that you're not going to get it perfect. This is life. Sleep is just like any other part of life. It's not going to be perfect. So, you know, maybe that appointment can't be rescheduled. That's fine. Maybe you either don't have the finances to hire a sitter, or you're not able to work around, the nap time with daycare, whatever the case may be. Show yourself some grace. First of all, it's never going to be perfect. And second of all, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that life happens the way it does sometimes. You are trying to do the best that you can do. And I know, and I hope that you know, that when you're trying to help your child, it's coming out of the generosity of your heart. You're trying to do the best for your child. And sometimes you don't have control over the stuff that doesn't go right. So show yourself a little bit of grace. If you want to receive emails like the one that I mentioned, you can, first of all, one of the options is to go to the link that I mentioned above with the 5 elements and also the red flags for an overtired child. After the stork, sleep.com/elements of healthy sleep. Or if you just want to join the list, you can go to afterthestorksleep.com/join the stork community. Okay, so that wraps up for today. So the main takeaway is help your child get consolidated sleep. And if they're struggling with that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. That is the main way that I help families one-on-one is if they're not able to fall asleep on their own, they're waking frequently at night or taking very short naps, I'm here to help you guys get on the right schedule for your child so that they are getting the best rest that they need so that you can also get the rest that you need. Next week, I hope you join me again at 1 p.m. We will be discussing sleep schedules. So the 4th element, we will be talking about the schedule or timing of sleep and the importance of that. So I hope by now you can see that these elements all are important. They all are contributing to one another, and if one of them is missing, it can throw off your child's sleep. So take a step back. If your child is struggling, take a step back and see, is there something that can be adjusted to help them get the rest that they need? Now that I'm done with that, do I have any questions? Any questions? Alrighty, well, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week.